Every episode from here on out, we're going to put a number on things. A star rating, right there on screen, for how closely each of our 9 groups lines up with a plain reading of Scripture. And I want to be upfront. That makes some people nervous. Numbers feel cold, faith doesn't. So today, before we score a single real topic, we're going to open up the scorecard itself, show you exactly how it works, what it can't do, and why we think a little bit of math is actually one of the most respectful things we can do here. Here's the honest pitch for why we do this at all. Proverbs 16:11 says, "Honest scales and balances belong to the Lord." The weights in the bag are His idea, not a modern spreadsheet habit. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 tells us to test everything and hold on to what's good. In Acts 17, the Bereans get called more noble than the church down the road for one specific reason. They checked what they were taught against the Scriptures every single day. And Deuteronomy 25:15 goes so far as to tie honest weights and measures directly to covenant faithfulness, that your days may be long in the land. None of this is a rebuke of faith. That's what careful faith looks like. This show is just that instinct with a chart. The mechanics are simple on purpose. 5 stars, half-star steps, 11 possible scores from 0 to 5. 5 stars is 100%. Full alignment with what we're calling the baseline reading, which we covered back in Episode 3. 3 stars is 60%, the line where something still counts as a genuine, if partial, alignment. 0 is 0, that's it. No secret 100-point number hiding underneath. The star rating you see on screen is the actual score, full stop. 2 Timothy chapter 3 describes Scripture itself as profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. That's genuinely the standard we're measuring every group against. We picked stars over, say, a raw percentage because a chart full of decimals reads like a spreadsheet, and a row of stars reads in about 3 seconds. Same precision, friendlier face. Quick refresher from Episode 2, because it matters a lot here. One of our 9 groups isn't a denomination at all. The baseline is a plain, historical grammatical reading of the Old and New Testaments. What the original words meant to the people who first heard them. No denominational filter layered on top. That's
Silent
not a
cold
new
open.
invention, by the way.
8
Nehemiah
candidates.
chapter 8 describes
question.
Ezra and the Levites
If you-
doing exactly this
Silent
after
cold
the
open.
exile.
Full bleed
They
cover
read the
image.
law
Holds
clearly
3-4
and
seconds before
gave the
cutting to the
sense
title slide.
so that the people
No narration on
understood
this
the
slide.
reading.
Quick show of
Clear
hands.
reading.
If
Plain
you've
sense.
8 candidates.
That's the whole
Silent
baseline method.
8 candidates.
Straight from the
2
text itself. And in every single episode, baseline is fixed at 5 stars, by definition. It's not in the running, it's the ruler. Nobody accuses a tape measure of being biased toward the wall. The 8 real traditions, Catholic, Orthodox, Anglican, Lutheran, Reformed, Baptist, Pentecostal, and Latter-day Saint, are the ones actually being scored against that ruler every time. Here's the actual rhythm of a topical episode. 5 checkpoints, same order every time. First, the initial scorecard, Old and New Testament only, nothing else on the table yet, measured against 2 Timothy 3:16's own standard for what Scripture is supposed to do. Then we layer in the BCE Apocrypha, the pre-Christ extra-biblical material, and rescore. Material like the Book of Enoch, which Jude himself quotes directly in verses 14 and 15 of his letter. Then AD-era apocryphal and patristic texts, the kind of material Paul gestures toward in 2 Thessalonians 2:15, holding to the traditions you were taught, either by our spoken word or by our letter. Then, because Latter-day Saint Scripture is genuinely additional revelation and not just extra commentary, we score it in its own 2 waves, the BCE analog wave, Book of Mormon material before 3 Nephi chapter 11, plus the Book of Abraham and Book of Moses, material 2 Nephi. 29 itself claims should stand alongside the Bible, not against it. Then the AD analog wave, the rest of the Book of Mormon from 3 Nephi 11 onward, plus the Doctrine and Covenants, which stakes its own authority claim in section 1, verses 37 and 38. These 5 checkpoints are steps 5 through 9 of the actual production spine, with step 10 being the final movement chart. 5 checkpoints, 5 rescores every single episode, so you always know exactly which layer of material, and which text, is responsible for any movement you see. One more rule before we get to the fun visual part. The 5 checkpoints are the mandatory rescore points, but they're not a leash. If something in the plain Old Testament reading, the plain New Testament reading, or the updated text check, steps 2, 3, and 4 of the production spine, would shift any group's star rating by half a star or more before we'd normally get to the next checkpoint, we stop and show you an interim scorecard right there. Isaiah 28 puts it better than I can. Sometimes it really is precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little. The picture builds gradually, and we're not going to make you wait through unscored minutes for the actual aha moment of the episode. But we're also not going to chart every tiny wobble. Anything under half a star or a shift only we'd notice stays off screen. Threshold, not a trickle. And no matter what, the initial scorecard and the final movement chart are locked in every single time. Let's actually run the mechanism once, with a topic you've already half seen in Episode 5. On a plain Old and New Testament reading, Hebrews 9:27 says it's appointed for man to die once, and after that, judgment, no described middle stage. Luke 23:43 reads the same direction. Jesus tells the criminal next to him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Immediate, not staged. Baseline sits at 5 stars. Now we layer in 2 Maccabees 12, verses 43 through 46, where Judas Maccabeus takes up a collection specifically so the dead might be delivered from their sin. Catholic doctrine cites this exact passage for its own teaching on prayer for the dead. The kind of catechism plus verse sourcing step 6 calls for whenever we score a group's actual confessional position, not just our own assumption of it. For a group reading Hebrews and Luke as settling the question outright, none of this moves anything, so the gap between them doesn't close. Same layer, same text, doing 2 different jobs depending who's reading it. That's a bridge for one side and simply irrelevant, not a divide, just a non-event for the other. And to be totally clear, those star values on screen are illustrative for today only. The real verdict, with real sourced numbers, is next episode. At the very end of every episode, all 9 groups step across the same chart together, checkpoint by checkpoint. Initial scorecard, BCE Apocrypha, AD Apocrypha, LDS BCE Analog, LDS AD Analog. And here's the habit I want you to build as a viewer. Don't just look at who's highest when the chart stops. Look at who traveled the farthest to get there. A group that starts at 4 stars and ends at 4 stars had a quiet episode. A group that starts at 4.5 and ends at 2.25 just had the most interesting story in the whole video, even if it's not the winner. And remember, there are no winners here, just movement. Proverbs 4:18 says the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, shining brighter and brighter until full day. That's genuinely what a good movement chart should feel like. A picture getting clearer, checkpoint by checkpoint, not a scoreboard. We'll always report that movement in star points, something like down 1.5 stars after the AD Apocrypha layer. Never as a percentage, so the chart and the math always speak the same language. So here's the whole system on one slide, in case you want to pause and screenshot it. On the left, the star key. 5 stars is 100%, 3 stars is 60%, 0 is 0, and halves are always allowed in between. On the right, the 5 checkpoints in order, every episode. Step 5, the initial OT and NT scorecard. Step 6, the BCE Apocrypha layer. Step 7, the AD Apocrypha layer. Step 8, the LDS BCE analog wave. Step 9, the LDS AD analog wave. Plus any interim rescore, the live rescoring rule kicks up along the way at steps 2 through 4. Step 10 is the final movement chart, mandatory every episode. And baseline just sits at 5 stars through the whole thing, holding the ruler steady. Habakkuk 2 has a line I think about a lot for slides exactly like this one. Write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. That's the whole job of a cheat sheet. That's it. That's the entire scoring system for the rest of the series. So that's the scorecard. The scale, the fixed baseline, the 5 checkpoints, the live rescoring rule, and the bridge or divide question we'll be asking at every layer. One consistent method, applied the exact same way, whether the topic is comforting or genuinely uncomfortable. If you remember one verse from today, make it the one we opened with. 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Test everything. Hold fast to what is good. That's the whole scorecard, really, just applied out loud every single week. Next time we run it for real. Episode 8, Does Apocrypha Pick Sides? The full version of that teaser you saw all the way back in Episode 2. And as always, what should we cover next? Tell us in the comments. If it fits our method, it might just move up the list.